long-term global partnerships with the U.S. Soy Advantage. With 96% of the world's consumers living outside of the United States, the international market is the largest customer of U.S. soy. Exports average 60% of U.S. production, with nearly 2 in every 3 rows grown going overseas. International customers are choosing U.S. soy for its exceptional composition, consistent supply, as well as the sustainability practices of our farmers. U.S. soy has an elite nutritional bundle of protein, amino acids, and energy that satisfies its hungry consumers. High-volume yields consistently provide an abundant supply that is delivered from our farms to overseas customers using the best transportation infrastructure in the world. Over 97% of our farms are family-owned, and our farmers are partners in trust, protecting their land for future generations. U.S. soybean farmers are the most sustainable in the world. The U.S. Soy Sustainability Assurance Protocol is one of the ways that U.S. farmers demonstrate their commitment to sustainability and continuous improvement. Using innovation like biotechnology for seed development and precision farming through GPS, U.S. farmers increased soy production by 96%, while consistently reducing our environmental footprint. In 30 years, the world must feed 9 billion people. Serving more than 80 countries around the world, this is U.S. Soy, and it is making a difference.
Well, thank you for being here with us this afternoon. My name is Jim Sutter, and I'm the CEO of the U.S. Soybean Export Council. And I'm excited to be here and talk about a subject that my team and I are quite passionate about, and that is international marketing of U.S. soy. And as I look around the room, I see many familiar faces and many people that have actually helped us and continue to help us in our work that we do marketing international soy. So for some of you, this will be a bit of a refresher course in what it is that our organization does. And hopefully you'll learn something. And for some of you that I don't know, I'm very happy to have you here so we can talk about this. You heard Secretary Perdue this morning, or many of you did anyway, and he talked about being a grow it and sell it sort of guy, you know, wanting to provide excellent customer service and moving U.S. crops out into the global marketplace or into the marketplace. And that's what our organization does. We do that on behalf of U.S. soybean farmers. We work for the checkoff, we work for the Foreign Agricultural Service, and we are an organization that has many industry members. A little bit about me. I'm the staff lead at USEC. I come from an ag background, grew up on a farm in Colorado. I've had industry experience working with oilseeds and oil, and I've been with USEC for 7 years. USEC is an organization that was founded in 2005 by the American Soybean Association and by the United Soybean Board. Those are our 2 founding members. In addition to those members, we have 99 other members. We have 101 members in total, and those members range from literally A to Z across the whole export and everything to do with soybean industry. And then we also have many state organizations, state soybean organizations, and a couple of Farm Bureau organizations as members of our organization. The work that we've been doing since '05 was work that was done historically by the American Soybean Association. International marketing has been going on, funded by U.S. soybean farmers and FAS. Since the 50s, so for a long time. And I think it's been very forward-thinking work that has been done. So what is it that we do? In real short, our job is to differentiate and build preference for U.S. soy and also work to ensure that we have market access for U.S. soy. We do that, part of the way we do that, and many of you have also been involved in this, is with outbound or inbound trade missions. Nothing better than taking U.S. growers to an international market and having them explain how they grow soybeans and talk about the practices that they use. That's an excellent way, we think. And likewise, bringing individuals from around the world to the United States, showing them how U.S. soybeans are grown, how they're transported, how they're handled. That's a great tool that we have for marketing, as an example. As was mentioned in that the video, just over 60% of the U.S. soybean crop is exported in the form of beans, meal, or oil. If you add to that the percentage that's exported as a form of meat, so the soy that's fed to pork or poultry that gets exported, it gets it up to almost 2/3 of the crop. So the international markets are really important to the soybean industry, to soybean farmers. The work we do internationally, we do a combination of technical servicing, trade servicing, and then this market access work. When I think about technical servicing, that's the work we would do in trying to, in more basic markets, trying to teach people how to better utilize soy if they're raising pigs or raising chickens. And then the trade servicing work would be risk management tools and really talking about the benefits of U.S. soy. We break our focus areas down into animal utilization, aquaculture utilization, oil and human utilization, and then sustainability or market access work. Those are the real 4 key categories that we work into. So today, the presentations that you're going to see are a collection of the people that we have around the world, our regional directors, and then some of the customers that we work with. So we want to give you a glimpse into what we do as we invest your resources, check off paying resources, FAS resources, and then industry resources. It's a virtual tour around the world. We thought that would be much easier than putting you on an airplane and taking you around the world. It'll take less time. Hopefully it will be interesting. I want you to see how we promote the U.S. Soy Advantage, and we have a great team around the world. We have great people, and I hope you come away with that same feeling as you see the videos that will be part of the collection. In between each of the videos, I'm going to do a little bit of talking and try and help ground or maybe pull together what you saw in a video, but this will be numerous videos, so hopefully that'll make it interesting for you. So with that, let's, here in front of you also, you see these regions. As we go around the world, we'll hit the various regions. The first region we're going to start with is the brown region there. That's the North Asia region. You see a regional map. It's China, obviously the big country there, Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. So let's go ahead and start our tour in North Asia. It's a very large market for U.S. soy, and it's one that is certainly in the news these days. The topic of trade relations with China is something we'll talk about more in just a moment.
The North Asia region includes the markets of China, Hong Kong, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. With more than 1.5 billion consumers, it boasts the highest per capita soy consumption in the world.
China actually now is the world's #1 soybean importer, the #1 soybean consumer in the world. So China is so important to the U.S. soy industry.
Livestock producers in this region consistently say they prefer U.S. soybean meal thanks to its reliable supply, its quality, and its richness in amino acids and protein.
It's a very large soybean oil consuming marketplace. And so you basically are feeding the pigs, chickens, and fish. The consumers buy that. They go home and they use soybean oil to cook it. And frequently they're using soy foods like soy sauce and soy paste and tofu to add right to that meat. And so they're consuming soy breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
The U.S. has introduced new technology such as intensive pond agriculture to farmers in North Asia, lowering costs in a highly sustainable way.
Water will not have to be flushed out of the ponds. They can continue to reuse the water. They can harvest the effluent from the fish and use it as organic fertilizer. The farmers in China have rapidly recognized this technology and are adopting it very quickly. And this is the way in which, just one small example about how the U.S. soybean farmers and their support for USEC not only are solving problems for the industry in North Asia, but they're also doing it in a way in which it's going to increase the utilization of U.S. soy.
The U.S. soy industry opened its first China office in 1982 and has built relations through regular international conferences that include visits to U.S. farms and facilities.
Relations between these industries, China and the U.S., are stronger and also demonstrate their confidence in U.S. soy.
So as the video just told you, in 1982, the first U.S. soy-funded office was opened in China. I think there was an awful lot of forward thinking being done. I don't know if anybody in this room was a part of the group that made the decision to do that and then continued to fund it through 1996 when the very first business took place, but shipping U.S. soy into China. But I'm sure there were some interesting discussions around boardroom tables and discussions about whether or not to keep that going, whether it was going to be worth it. But my hat's off to the people that made those decisions, because China has certainly been a market that has been worth the investments that were made in it early on. And I think the relationships that China and the U.S. industry has built, the good work that has been done over the 35 years that we've had that office in place, and the work that's been done, allows us to have serious discussions in China when issues come up or when there are things to be discussed, such as the current trade issues that we're talking about. You've all heard about the current FM issue, which was really an issue between the AQSIQ, the Governmental Inspection Group, and APHIS, part of USDA. They've been looking at the weed seed issue. They've developed a short-term game plan to focus on FM as a way to measure that, or as a way to try and monitor that. But I think while it's gotten some portrayal as a real problem between the two countries, I think actually it's part of a solution. And you'll all be hearing more about that. There was a presentation yesterday by Undersecretary Ibaugh where he talked about the systems approach. But China is a very important customer of ours, and we're collectively working with them, trying to develop this approach to solve the problem that we have. We also have the trade issues. You've probably heard our administration talk about potential trade issues with China. And we're looking at a Section 232 case on steel, Section 232 case on aluminum. Those are both big issues that are facing China and U.S. relations right now. We have been pushing hard in terms of our relations with the Chinese government and our stakeholders there, talking about there are multiple ways to solve a trade imbalance. We can either start trying to block Chinese imports coming into the U.S. to reduce our imports, or, and certainly the path we would prefer seeing happen, is trying to see more goods being sold to China. And while soybeans alone cannot solve this issue, selling more soybeans to China and having the Chinese industry buying more U.S. soy could be a great example, and perhaps a point that would get the administration to give them more time to solve this trade issue, rather before we would take significant steps and put more tariffs in place. So that's certainly something we're talking about. As I think about opening this office back in 1982, as I mentioned, I was in industry before I joined USEC, and I made my first trip to China in the late 80s. And when I think about the way China looked in the late 80s, with the kind of dark streets at night and not much activity, and
we export this year. I think we've exported 35 million tons of soybeans to China.
Cars.
Our production.
Sorry about that. No, that's all right. It's changed significantly today. So the streets of Shanghai were very dark and very simple then, and they're not at all that way today. So we're very fortunate to have the presence that we do have in that market, and it's going to continue to be an important market for us. So now let's hear from an economist that we have working for us, Mr. John Bays.
We export this year. I think we've exported 35 million tons of soybeans to China. Our production's 112. So that gives you a pretty good indication of how important China is. And China's the number one market for exports of U.S. soybeans. It's the number one market for exports of Brazilian soybeans. It's the number one export market for Argentine soybeans. China's imports this year are going to be 92 million tons. That's pretty amazing, and considering that the soybean is native to China, and yet the biggest producers in the world are all in the Western Hemisphere.
So let's move on. We'll go to the next region that I'd like to talk about now, and that's the Americas region, much closer to home. Most of the Americas region is south of the United States. We think of Mexico and then the other countries in Latin America, but Canada is also one of the countries that we look at as being in the Americas. It's the largest export market for soybean meal, soybean oil, and some soy ingredients, so more of our processed products go to these markets. You know, the previous market, we talked about 1.5 billion people being there. There's 647 million in the Americas, so a smaller market, but a very important market for the U.S., given the proximity that we have and the close relationship that we've enjoyed over many years with these markets. Let's go ahead and roll the first video.
The Americas are the largest U.S. export market for soybean meal, soybean oil, and soy ingredients. There's also a growing demand for meat, poultry meat, and eggs. About 647 million people live in the Americas, making sustainability a key factor.
They have started talking about sustainability, and especially the aquaculture sector that is already exporting their animal protein to other countries. This is one of the requirements for exporting to Europe and to the U.S., to have a sustainable production and these animals to be fed with a sustainable raw material as well.
In Cuba, shrimp aquaculture is growing as it targets Cuba's booming tourism. Mexico, Canada, Colombia, and Central America are currently the largest markets for U.S. soy products.
Normally, they look for high content of protein, but other factors such as digestibility of amino acids and metabolized energy.
Despite having many competitors in South America, there is still a preference for U.S. product because the quality stands out.
We are influencers in each of the countries where we have programs. They take our input very much into consideration, which is very important.
You heard from Belinda, who's actually based in Venezuela, does work for us throughout the Latin American region. And she talked about the special bond that exists between our customers in the Americas and the U.S. industry that supplies to them. As I mentioned, we have proximity, and that allows them to enjoy just-in-time shipments. So whereas other people have to plan further ahead, one of the benefits we have with going to the Americas is the quick shipment time that goes there. NAFTA, a topic that came up this morning in Secretary Perdue's comments, and one that certainly has been on people's minds. And it's really two of the key customers or countries within the Americas region, Mexico and Canada. They're our partners in NAFTA. This agreement was put in place some years ago. 1993, I think, was the year when it finally got into operation. Our ag exports are up 400% to Mexico since 1987. Just as the NAFTA discussions got started. So 400% growth, that is really something. It's an important market and one that we will certainly continue to keep focusing on whether or not we have NAFTA in place. Our team, particularly on the ground in Mexico, has been very concerned and has been working with customers there, talking about the importance and the belief that U.S. producers have in how important that market is to them, and trying to reassure them that we're working hard to prevent our government from pulling out of NAFTA. And I think there seems to be much more interest in finding a solution to moving forward and finding a resolution for that trade agreement. Let's go ahead and look at the next video.
Look, sustainability, I've been talking to our sales team, and it's a very, very good, I think it's going to be a very helpful tool for us to market US soybean oil, okay? I think the demand of the market for a sustainable product is going to be increasing every day. We've started to have inquiries primarily for the food usage, people like PepsiCo are starting to ask, where are your beans coming from? Do you have your documents that you can share with us? So based on that, I just had a conversation with one of my major suppliers, and I told him, hey, I need this certificate of my previous cargoes and the ones we're getting, we're going to get in the coming months. So I think that's going to be a first step on getting those certificates. And I think the next step is how do we market to the final consumer that piece of paper?
So that was the Americas, but it was a great introduction to Europe, because the topic that he was just talking about, the topic of sustainability, is a topic that began in Europe probably 10 years ago. People there really started talking about and wanting to know more about where's my food coming from? And that turned into a question for the large food manufacturers, the Unilevers, the Nestles, those type of companies. And they were trying to have to talk to the people who were supplying them with raw material about, hey, how are these products being grown? And that developed into this whole discussion around sustainability. So our organization and all of the soy family organizations have been quite active discussing sustainability over the last few years. And we have developed, you heard the gentleman before talking about the certificates that we've developed. And as we talk about Europe and as we get into this discussion, we'll talk a little more about how that sustainability, the U.S. Soy Sustainability Assurance Protocol works and how it verifies sustainability of the products, the U.S. soy products that we are shipping to Europe. That was really the starting point for this, but to other destinations as well, as you just heard. So let's go ahead and you see this this very large region of Europe and the Middle East, North Africa. We have those combined because there are some similarities there, and they're important markets for us. So let's go ahead and look at this video.
The Europe, Middle East, and North Africa region stretches all the way from Ireland to Saudi Arabia.
Soy is used primarily in the animal feed industry in Europe and the Middle East. Poultry is the largest use. In Europe, the hog operations are very large and take advantage of U.S. soy. Also, we work in the Middle East on dairy and quite a bit on aquaculture, as that's a couple of good growth markets that we see lots of opportunity for.
More than 2.1 million metric tons of U.S. soy are sourced for soy crushing and animal agriculture in the Middle East and North Africa, home to 380 million people.
They very specifically make sure they keep their U.S. soybean meal for the baby chicks, for the breeders. So these specialized, very sensitive, the most important part of their commercial flocks. They're making sure to use U.S. soybeans.
The European Feed Association approved the U.S. Soy Sustainability Protocol as a verified sustainability program. 13 European countries import U.S. soy.
In the last year, we exported 4 million tons of U.S. soy. The importers to Europe, the importers got the SSAP on over 2 million, so a little over 50% of the imports into Europe of U.S. soy is under the SSAP program.
In the Middle East, North Africa, there are great opportunities for the U.S. soybean industry in aquaculture, especially in Egypt.
Actually, Egypt's the home of the tilapia, so the fish that now has become very popular in the U.S. Started in Egypt, and they're one of the major producers of tilapia in the world. A lot of the fish diets take anywhere from 25% to 50% of the feed is soybeans. And this gives a great opportunity as this continues to increase to provide more feed and a very good quality feed to those customers.
So there you heard from Brent Babb, who was our regional director for the Europe and MENA regions, and he talked about quite a diverse range of things. Talked about the diversity of the markets, Europe comparing it to the Middle East, and he talked about sustainability. But first I'd like to talk just a little bit before we move on to another video about Europe and how they are really a leader in many ways in terms of setting expectations for the rest of the world. I mentioned sustainability and how this is something that we've been working on for a period of time and how it began in Europe. Well, the concepts around sustainability and the ideas there are things that have been exported to other markets around the world. And that's one of the reasons that although Europe is a large, mature market that doesn't change very much, if you look at their overall demand, it's been pretty flat over the last 15, 20 years. It's a very important market for us to be involved in because consumer trends and consumer thoughts are oftentimes started in a place like Europe, and so we need to be very much in touch with those. It is the #2 market for U.S. beans if you look at it as a region in whole, China now being the largest, but Europe collectively is the #2 market. And a question that I often get about Europe is, well, what about biotech? Because we hear from Europeans, and the expectation must be in people's minds that they all want non-GM soybeans. In fact, until China became such a large importer of soybeans, Europe was the largest importer of biotech soy in the world. Now that China has become so big, Europe is the #2 importer. But the vast majority of the soybeans and the soybean meal that is imported into Europe, either from North America or South America, are biotech soybeans that are processed in Europe, and then the feed, the meal is turned into feed for livestock. The oil is either used for some food uses, some biofuel uses, that kind of thing. And then the meal that gets imported primarily from South America, a little bit from North America, is from biotech soybeans. So they are a large user of biotech soy, and that's a misconception sometimes that people have. We mentioned sustainability before. Now we're going to hear from two different customers, one in Europe and one in the Middle East, that will talk about sustainability and talk about the importance to their particular business or their association. The first gentleman, I think, is he really gives you a good impression of how important something like this is in Europe, and just kind of a good idea of the mindset that they go through as they think about this.
I think the most important thing is that they know what kind of difference there are, not even in sustainability requirements, but also in cultures. Why are European citizens asking for what they ask? And why should producers in North America fulfill the wishes of the European consumers? I think that international buyers should know that the European consumer is very involved with sustainability. But not only that, we use commodities for feeding animals as a feed industry. And feeding animals has to do with animal welfare and all kind of other things too. And consumers look after feed in all these ways, even with animal welfare. And this all together, mixed up, becomes a standard. And, well, I think the international community and North American farmers should know that this kind of wishes are ending up in the requirements we have.
U.S. soy has an edge over other soybean sources around the world and other protein sources because of its high nutritional value and consistency. Its sustainability. Sustainability is very important when we make our purchasing decisions. Usually, U.S. soybean has higher sustainability when compared to other products. Supply of raw materials is very important in our business. We usually we should have a steady supply of products, and U.S. soybeans usually have a steady supply and consistency over other products from other countries. U.S. soy farmers they always innovate and use new technologies. Also, and most importantly, the support which is done by the USIC offices and USIC representatives around the world.
So there you've heard from a U.S. soy customer in the Americas. You've heard from a couple of U.S. soy customers, one in representing the whole European-wide feed industry, and one with a large organization in the Middle East based in Jordan. And to all of them, sustainability is important. And so I really wanted to emphasize that point because I think it's something that people sometimes wonder about. Who cares about this? Why is this important that we be able to verify this for our customers? And it's something that you heard them all. In their own reasons, for their own purposes in their countries, their consumers are concerned about this. So for their businesses, they're trying to be able to market this in a way. So the fact that we have the U.S. Soy Sustainability Assurance Protocol that allows us to verify the export of sustainable soy gives us a marketing advantage versus soy from other origins. So for all of the producers in the room, I want to thank you for producing soy in the way that you do. This is a protocol that you don't have to sign up for, but it's really based upon the overall conservation practices that you use by being a part of the USDA conservation programs. So thank you for the way that you farm that allows us to have this marketing alternative. Now we're going to move on and look at Southeast Asia, a very dynamic part of the world. Numerous countries in Southeast Asia. You'll hear from our regional director there who will talk about some of the countries. But it is really, it's a part of the world with young population, rapidly developing GDP growth at a quick pace. We've seen, particularly in some of these countries, Vietnam is one where, 20 years ago there was hardly a commercial feed industry. And today they've got a 15, 17 million ton commercial feed industry, rapidly growing pork industry. So it's an area where there is rapid change going on. And U.S. soy is, in some of these countries, very widely used and respected, preferred. And so we're trying to get that same situation going in all the markets. We're very fortunate to have it in some. And so we try to take what we've learned in those markets and utilize it in others. Aquaculture, we've mentioned that a couple of times. Aquaculture, we think there is great promise for aquaculture in the Southeast Asia region, and that'll also be covered in the video. So let's go ahead and run that.
Southeast Asia is an important market for U.S. soy, with its young, increasingly affluent and educated growing middle-class population, its dynamic social-economic backdrop, and thriving consumption and consumer confidence.
The Association of Southeast Asian Nations comprises of 10 countries. The countries we look after are the major economies in Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia.
Last season, the Philippines overtook Mexico as the top market for U.S. soybean meal. The imported U.S. soybean meal is a main feed ingredient in swine, poultry, and aquaculture feed rations. End users in the Philippines will pay a premium for U.S. soybean meal because of its better quality and consistency.
Feed production figure has been growing on average in the last couple of years between 8 to 10%, which is a really good growth rate. When you look at feed production, that translates down to growth in animal numbers, growth in the importation of raw feed ingredients, but the most important point is people are eating more.
Thailand is the second largest economy in the region and a major exporter of poultry products. It's also the region's largest shrimp producer, exporting more than 300,000 metric tons last year. Indonesia is the U.S. third largest export market for whole soybeans, with more than 95% used for a traditional native dish called tempeh.
They look at the total quality that is provided by U.S. soy. And when I say total quality, it talks about the quality of the product, the consistency of the product, the logistic superiority that the U.S. has in terms of delivering the product to the destination countries.
U.S. soy has been investing in developing markets in Southeast Asia for almost 4 decades. Last season, more than 275 million bushels of U.S. soybeans and soy products were exported to this region.
So you heard from Tim Lowe, who's our regional director, who's based in Singapore, and he talked about the various markets there. And one thing I know some of you have traveled to Southeast Asia and have had the opportunity to interact with people from there, but one thing that I find so interesting about that part of the world is the thirst for knowledge that those people seem to have. When we conduct an event, when we hold a seminar, the people come early and the people stay late. And they take notes and they ask lots of questions because they're certainly hungry for more information. And I think that's what's given us the opportunity to really talk about the U.S. soy advantage in those markets and talk about the quality things. You heard about the Philippines being an example where people pay a premium for U.S. soy. And I think that's a great example of how that sort of work has been done. We will hear from a longtime supporter, actually, of U.S. soy. He's been buying U.S. soy for his family processing business located in Malaysia in this next video. A very forward-thinking individual that has developed, they're a large crusher in that country, and they have other side businesses. So let's hear from Dr. Neo.
We're always looking for value. And what adds value, for example, for feed would be protein, energy, things like this. And for food, obviously, functionality. Like if we bought a food soybeans, we expect it to make a good soya milk or tofu, and to, of course, have a high yield to make the maximum amount of tofu and soya milk. So functionality and yield, those are things we look for food. But for feed, we are looking for the essential, ingredients, of functionality, such like protein, energy, which is what animals need to grow. The American farmers are probably the most, shall we say, efficient farmers in terms of yield, in terms of supply chain, logistics, and what have you. So they are able to control the whole value chain. from the farm to the export.
So there you heard from an individual who, Dr. Neo has a PhD in nutrition, and I think he's also a medical doctor. He also has that degree. So he knows a lot about science, and it's interesting that he has been such a strong supporter of U.S. soy. A market in that part of the world that we are just starting to tap into or get involved in is the market in Burma. We believe that that will be a new market, so there will be a shift of some resources into that market trying to help there. That's an area we think it can be another similar market to Vietnam, which has grown so rapidly over the last 15 years, as I indicated a moment ago. So now we'll travel to our last region of the world. We're going to the Asia subcontinent, and that's an area where it's really India in the center and then the countries that surround India. Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan. And these are markets where U.S. soy has been investing since 1997. That's where the first work really was done, focused on India, with efforts there to try and help get them the term that was used in those days was reverse marketing, trying to help them consume all of the soy that they were producing, because they are one of the larger producers, not nearly as large as the U.S. in volume, but ranking-wise, I think they're the 5th or 6th producer of soy in the world. So trying to help them grow their poultry market, grow their aquaculture market, so that they would use up the soy that they were producing themselves with that big population they have, and then be less of an exporter of soy to other nations around Southeast Asia, where they were a competitor for U.S. soy. That work has, as we have learned over time, everything in India seems to take a little longer than you expect, but I think we're about there. They are essentially consuming all of the soy that they produce. They have very little to export. They're a very large importer of oil because they have a need for vegetable oil. But the interesting thing is we're now seeing the neighboring countries around India, mainly Pakistan and Bangladesh, becoming significant importers of U.S. soy very rapidly in the last few years. So it's an interesting part of the world. It's one where we really view as a future market. In our nomenclature, we would talk about these as being basic markets, where there's still work to be done in terms of teaching people how to better feed chickens, better raise fish, because we think these markets are really going to grow in the years to come. So let's run our first video about the Asia subcontinent.
The Asia subcontinent is an important consumption market for U.S. soy, with nearly 1.75 billion people living in this region.
We have 5 countries, and the 5 countries are India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Nepal. There wasn't much U.S. soy coming into our region, let's say, way back in 2008. And then we worked on these markets for several years and created preference for U.S. soy.
The first imports of U.S. soy started in the form of meal to Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. Soybean meal consumption has grown by more than 65% over the last 3 years.
The most popular meat for all these countries, socially, culturally, financially, is poultry meat, followed by aquaculture.
India is the largest soybean oil importer in the world, and its animal feed industry is expected to double over the next 5 years. It has also shown a growing interest in food-grade soybeans, flour, nuts, and non-GMO meal. USEC has worked to create awareness among Pakistani solvent extraction industry members to help source and establish preference for U.S. soybeans.
Our target audiences are soy crushers. We teach them to buy U.S. soy better and crush them better to produce U.S. soy oil and U.S. soy meal.
The Asia subcontinent region is working to conquer a widespread nutrition and protein deficiency issue, which offers much opportunity for the growth of soy product use.
The population of this entire region is 50% of it almost is below the age of 27. So that becomes the most powerful driving factor, because this young generation, which has more knowledge, health conscious, brand consciousness, no patience, more disposable income, these are going to be the drivers for change.
So that is Vijay, our Deputy Regional Director in that part of the world. And I'd just like to comment on he talked about the young population there and their rapidly changing tastes and desires. Many people think, well, why will India ever turn into much? Because the people there are primarily vegetarians. I think there are recent studies that have shown that up to 70% of the population wants to be a meat consumer. They either have had economic limitations, haven't been able to consume meat, or they have had availability limitations where they haven't had meat available to them. So we believe that poultry consumption and fish consumption in that part of the world can grow significantly and will be a larger consumer of soy. So again, that's another market that we would consider to be basic markets where we can utilize our technical servicing work to try and really jumpstart demand in that market. Let's play the next video on that market.
But I think the next really big boom is going to come in South Asia, and particularly right now we're already seeing it in Bangladesh and in Pakistan, which we're really seeing rapid growth in imports. But I think in the longer term it's going to be India. Some people think India's population is already larger than China's today, and certainly it's going to be even higher in the future. So if they start seeing per capita income growth, which I think they will, they're going to be wanting to consume a lot more animal protein, more than they're going to have to import soybeans to do it because they're not going to be able to produce what they need. So I think that while it will never grow at the rate of China, and most likely, India will grow. And the reason it won't grow as fast is rather oddly, but it's a democracy. Things don't happen in India as fast as they'd happen in a command and control economy like in China. But it will grow, and I think that's where we're going to see phenomenal demand in the future.
So there, we've made it all the way around the world. Before I open it up to questions, I'd just like to say a couple more things. I wanted to just touch on the fact that the United Soybean Board, that is the main funder of USEX activities. Together we partner with other groups as well, but the United Soybean Board, the National Checkoff, is our main funding organization. They've just done a kind of a refresh of their international marketing strategy. And I'm very excited that we will have the opportunity to be on the forefront of helping to implement that new strategy. And it's what I would call an evolution rather than a revolution. An evolution in that we've already started kind of moving towards some of these things over the last few years. But the shift is we'll be working more with markets that are these basic markets like I talked about, where we see real future demand growth coming, where we think that the basic work that we can do, teaching people how to better utilize soy, to grow animals, that'll really help jumpstart demand, and that'll have larger payback in terms of growing demand for U.S. soybean farmers and for the U.S. soybean industry. And then we'll scale back some of the work that we've been doing in the more mature and some of the more what we call expansion, kind of that middle ground markets. Not abandoning those markets at all, but putting more focus on the basic markets and pulling back our support, focusing on relationships, continuing to have the relationships in all of the markets, and having an overarching focus on market access work, because as I've said in several cases, whether it's biotech approvals or sustainability or other market access issues, that's important in the whole world. But again, I'm very excited that our organization will have the opportunity to help implement that shifting strategy that the United Soybean Board is working on, and we've been working together with FAS and all of our members and stakeholders as that has been developed, and I think everyone is quite excited by this shift that we'll be making. We're in the figuring it out stage in terms of figuring out exactly what the details are as we move forward with that right now. So again, I'd like to, as we open it up to questions, I'd like to thank you for being here with us today, having the opportunity to tell you what we do. We have exciting things going on, and I hope you could tell both from my comments and from the comments of all the people that on the video that we got a lot of enthusiastic team members, and I have several here in the room with me that are really excited about the work we do in terms of marketing U.S. soy internationally. Thanks again for growing your soybeans in a sustainable manner. That gives us a competitive advantage as we do our marketing. Thanks for the support for the program. The people in this room, many of you contribute to the checkoff that is a key support factor for us, and I hope that you feel like you're getting your money's worth through that investment and the international marketing work that we do. 60.5% of the soybeans that are grown in the U.S. going into international markets. And I think it appears that we're going to continue to grow more and more soybeans, so we need to make sure we continue to grow these international markets. So at this point in time, I'd like to open it up to questions, if anybody may have any. I see one just in the center there. I think we have a microphone coming to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I noticed that you had non-GMO soybean meal listed for South Asia, and there's a strong activist anti-GMO in India specifically. Do you think that's going to change anytime soon?
It's very interesting in India because they are a very large producer of a biotech crop. They're, I think, the largest producer of biotech cotton in the world in India, yet they have, and they consume all of the cotton seed from that internally in India. But at this point in time, they are not growing any biotech soybeans, and they have as you said, they have a limitation on the importation of biotech crops, soybeans specifically, and other oilseeds and other grains coming into their country. My own opinion is that will change when they have to when they need to open the market up and import soybeans in style. I think they will make a pragmatic change and start to utilize more imports of biotech crops. I mentioned that they're the largest importer of soybean oil in the world, and that's all soybean from biotech soybeans. So they don't make it a point to import non-GM soybean oil. So I think it's currently it's more of a protection for farmers and more of an internal debate that they haven't wanted to have yet. But I think practically when they need to import soy in big style, they will start to import GM soy. That's my opinion. So I know it's not shared by everyone, but that's my opinion. Daddy?
Jim, probably 10 years ago, when Europe first started looking for sustainable soy, there was a round table for sustainable soy out of Brazil. And of course, we thought we compared pretty favorably with what they were doing then, and we certainly do. I just wondered whether that program's continued, or are there sources in Brazil and Argentina that argue that they're provide sustainability certificates?
That's a great question, Danny. Thank you. So there is a group that really focuses on South American soy, primarily called the Round Table for Responsible Soy. And it was really the first main sustainability verification scheme in place around the world. U.S. farmers, you were probably one of them, Danny, at the time, took a look at this and said, we don't think that's really something we want to implement in the United States. So we set out, working together with other people, to put a different tool in place, which we have today, which fortunately has gained sort of the same reliability and same approvals in Europe that RTRS has. RTRS is still in place. Last year, I think they did between 2 and 3 million tons of soy primarily from South America going into Europe on a verification basis. In contrast to that, the U.S. did about 12 million tons of soy out of the U.S. of verified sustainable. So our program is significantly larger than their program. Their program does require on-farm audits and has more cost to it. So I think we were very fortunate to have been put together a program here in the U.S. based upon the conservation practices and the audits that you already are subject to. So we didn't have to go down that RTRS route. It's still in place, but it's not as popular, I would say, with consumers around the world as the SSAP.
Is it just in Brazil?
Brazil and Argentina. Yes, sir.
When you're looking at U.S. export of soybeans or soybean products, what keeps you up at night?
Wow. Lately, it's honestly speaking, it's been more of these trade issues. It's worry about it's worry about the interim, the immediate shock if we would pull out of NAFTA or if we would put some significant tariffs on China. Those kind of things. I think in the long run, I think the market will sort of balance out and we would probably regain the demand. But in the very short run, it would be extremely messy, and that worries me. I've been worried about this weed seed issue with China because when we first started hearing about it, They were talking about getting weed seed levels in U.S. soybeans down to a very, very low level, and I think that's just not practical. I think over time we can continue to improve our weed seed content with more focus on this, with getting new biotech traits approved, we can make improvements. But if they would have implemented something already, I think we could have been having problems with that. Good question.
Along those lines, Jim, just to continue that conversation, you know, China is the one that has not approved Enlist soybean trait, so they're actually holding us up to accomplishing some of that goal. What do you know about that, and what does it take to get that cleaned up?
Yeah, that is a real frustration that the Chinese approval process is as slow as it is. We talked to them about the need for transparent, predictable, and science-based approvals for new biotech events. I know there are some people in this room that have participated in discussions in China with them on that topic. We take U.S. growers there. We meet with the Ministry of Agriculture people who are responsible for issuing those final approvals. We've met with them as recently as 3 weeks ago to have the discussion. Now we have a new talking point in that their government has asked us here in the U.S. to make a change within our system to reduce our FM level in our contracts, really with an aim to reducing weed seed content. But hey, they are the ones that are controlling a very important tool, the E3 technology, which we think could have a significant impact on helping deal with resistant weeds. So we made that point to them. I know the U.S. government continues to make that point to them, and we just need to keep hammering, because it's you know, it's not transparent, predictable, or science-based, but they need to get that done.
What is the holdup with that? I mean, why won't they approve it? I'm just curious what the holdup is.
Yeah, in my opinion, the holdup is the social reaction they get, or the public reaction they get whenever they approve a new biotech trait. There are some NGOs and some people that speak out in social media and put negative comments about biotech. Now, we make the point to them that, listen, they're importing 92 million tons last year. This year it'll probably be 95 million tons of soybeans. Those are all biotech traits already. It's simply, you know, I use the example when I talk to them about, you know, we have cell phones, and we don't use the same cell phones we used 10 years ago. We adopt new technology. We don't necessarily, I still only have one cell phone, but it has new technology because it works better. Our farmers need the same thing. They need to have the ability to use these new technologies, so they're not going to be receiving more biotech soybeans, but they're going to be receiving biotech soybeans, hopefully with fewer weed seeds in them. So I think maybe where intellectually they get it, I think they feel social pressures that keep them going slow.
Seems odd they would approve extend, and even Europe has approved Enlist now, and they won't. That just seems odd.
Yeah, it is an odd process. I know that there was the Enlist product did get caught up in they made a change a couple of years ago that required multiple year field trials in China versus only 1 year field trial. And I think Enlist came along right after they put that new rule in place. So it was unlucky, if you will, that they had to go another year of the field trial. You know, I know the argument was made. We put forth the argument of why should why make this change? But they make the rules in their country, and they did that. What we need to have happen right now is have another there's this National Biotech Safety Committee in China that meets, and they're the ones that have to all agree, okay, we'll approve the new traits. I think it's been at least 6 months since that committee has met. We hoped that they would meet before the end of the calendar year. They didn't. We hoped they would meet before Chinese New Year. They didn't. Now we're hoping they'll meet soon. You know, Chinese New Year is now over, but they need to have that committee meeting. It's a very frustrating point, and we're trying to leverage this agreement that I think was the right thing for the U.S. to do on wheat seed and FM, because they're our #1 customer, so we needed to react. But we're trying to leverage the proactive good work that the U.S. government did in making that agreement with them to getting some support for them in approving these new traits.
Jim.
Oh, there you go.
With the WISH program in Ghana. Do you see any more prospects in Africa?
That's a great question, and I didn't really, there's so many more things I would have liked to have talked about as well, but the WISH program is a part of the American Soybean Association, and it's sort of a brother program of ours that works in what I would call very immature markets. So the very first stage of market development is the work that WISH does. They've got a program in Ghana. They've got several other programs too. But we are going to work together with WISH and look at the markets in sub-Saharan Africa as part of our efforts now to focus more on basic markets. We're going to be doing a readiness assessment on which markets should be included in that. We've got some in North Africa that we'll be including, Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria. One that looks like maybe it should be on the list for our markets working with WISH would be a place like Nigeria. Big population. They've got money because of petroleum, but they have several issues you got to overcome. So I think that Africa, it's a place where there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people that would like to consume more food. So certainly a place we need to look at. A place where WISH has really been the part of the U.S. soy family that has been doing work there so far. Our work is in North Africa, that MENA region. We haven't done much in sub-Saharan Africa, but I think we will be in the future. Good question. Thanks. Folks, thank you very much. Appreciate your time, and keep growing those soybeans. We'll keep trying to make sure we get them out into international markets. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.